and I'm very pleased to start this conversation with two important friends of Brazil, friends of Africa, and friends of the Brazil-Africa Institute. I have Ajong and Eluma. Thank you very much for your kind participation. I know you're very busy, but I know that after this conversation, we will be able to understand how the integration and the large-scale production and the small-scale supply can be combined. So, Ajong, thank you very much for your time. Eluma, thank you very much for your time as well. Please.
Mr. Eluma, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Ajong. Good afternoon to you.
For participants who are not familiar with the Africa Finance Corporation, would you start with an introduction and a brief background about the corporation?
Thank you very much. My name again is Eluma Obibuaku, and I head the Africa business of the power business of the Africa Finance Corporation. The AFC essentially is focused on infrastructure, and ever since we were formed in 2007, have been focused on filling the infrastructure gap with private sector type investments from Cape to Cairo. We're a membership organization wherein African country governments are members of the AFC. As of today, we've got 27 countries that are members, but we have investments both in member countries and in non-member countries. The important thing to keep in mind is that our investments are essentially throughout these countries. Whether or not they're members, we will make investments, and we will make investments and participate on private sector type investments within power, oil and gas / natural resources, which includes mining, heavy industries, roads, transport, and then telecommunications. We will do everything from equity type investments through debt, senior debt, mezzanine instruments as well. As of we're rated by Moody's, therefore we're investment grade, Moody's A3. We're an investment grade institution, one of the few on the continent as far as lenders are concerned, and we have a balance sheet today of $7.2 billion. I'll stop so far.
It might also be good to have some context on the overall energy situation in the continent. How well is Africa meeting its energy needs as of today?
Africa, unfortunately, is far from where it needs to be. There's about 55% energy access in the most part. On the northern part of Africa, the situation is much better in terms of energy access, or people who have access to electricity. In the sub-Saharan part, it's not so much. As of the World Bank Energy Progress Report, which was issued, I believe, in 2019, put out the figure that by 2030, there will be 680 million people worldwide without access to electricity. 90% of that number will be in Africa, and more specifically, will be in sub-Saharan Africa. So the challenge for us is significant in terms of access to electricity. The gap that needs to be filled is significant. The capacity of government to fill that gap is not, frankly, where it needs to be. And the dollars requirement and the dollars required to fill this infrastructure gap, by some estimates, is north of $80 billion. So very significant sums of money would be required to begin to chip away at this problem. Fortunately for us, there are, in some countries more than others, resources in terms of renewable resources that would help fill this gap that are abundant. Secondly, the cost of renewable energy, be they wind, be they solar, etc., is going down significantly and has been going down, frankly, over the past 10 to 12 years. And that is creating an opportunity to help fill this gap. And as of course you know, in the thermal side of things, in terms of even gas resources, quite a few African countries are blessed with these resources as well as hydro resources. So there is a path to solving the problems, but the solution will require a lot of work on our collective part.
We might revisit some of the specifics that you have raised, but let's talk a little more on the challenges. What are those major challenges holding back the continent from optimizing its energy objectives? And could you draw a line between the energy potential that the continent has and the resources that are needed to optimize potential?
There are a number of different things that are getting in the way, but I think let me start first by saying that financial resources are a big piece, but I will step back even from financial resources to say that in a lot of African countries, in too many African countries, you do not have the right regulatory environment that will invite in private sector financing for first generation assets, and then also transmission line assets to take power from where it's generated to where it's required. So we need to do a lot of work in terms of our regulatory regime for this particular sector. That is very, very important. We need to also make adjustments to tariffs in terms of what is called cost-reflective tariffs. Very few countries on the continent actually have tariffs that permit you to make these investments. And one good example would be that's really emerged very nicely into this area would be the Ivory Coast, wherein you have the appropriate environment that allows the private sector, if there's a bid announced today, to participate very, very, very nicely to provide investments for electricity. So you need a lot more of those sorts of things so that you can drive funding to this area to help fill up the deficit that public sector funding cannot drive. So the reason I'm putting that first is that it's easy to say that the money is not there or that the money is not enough. But what I'm talking about is there are certain things that we can do to drive the financing that needs to be there. This has a knock-on effect in terms of other aspects of economic growth. I also mentioned cost-reflective tariffs. That is to say, you have to have the tariffs that are high enough that people feel comfortable that if they invest, they can get their money back. You also need to have an environment that allows two sets of funding to come in. One is funding in the form of debt. And in that, we have bankability-related issues. And I don't want to get into the technical elements, but the bankability-related issues will get all the way down to the technology and the operation of these facilities beyond just the regulatory environment that needs to be in place. And then also the regulatory climate, as well as the business climate in country, will encourage investors, both investors in country and investors out of country. Everybody wants to be able to get the sense that should they invest, they will get the returns that they expect to get, and they will also get the appropriate protections from government to allow them to take out their investment. There are also foreign currency issues, devaluation issues that come into this, and you also want to make sure that the regime and the tariff regime that you have, as well as the electricity sales regime that you have in various countries, allows for you to be compensated for changes in exchange rate that's not driven by the operations of the business. So there are a number of different issues that are well known to most governmental parties. that are well known to parties in the regulatory space, but who need to do something about it in order to take advantage of capital from outside of their shores, as well as take advantage, frankly, of capital in their shores that is afraid of participating in this long tenor, or rather long-term type of investment. I'll stop so far.
Now, are there specific examples of projects that have been funded by the African Finance Corporation that you will want to share with us? And typically, what kind of projects does the AFC feel comfortable responding to? If a country were to come to you for a potential partnership, what will the AFC be looking out for?
Okay, so let me answer the first part of your question, which would be easier to answer in terms of concrete projects. And I will confine myself to the power space because we actually do, we've done things all the way from airports down to port facilities, oil and gas, etc., in various countries in Africa. But just to focus on specific projects, we've got the Cabiolica project, wherein we are the largest equity shareholder in Cabiolica, which is in Cape Verde. It's a wind farm in Cape Verde. We also the largest shareholder in Sempower Ghana, a 350 megawatt facility, gas-fired combined cycle in Ghana. We're also participants in terms of lending to the Mamba project in Zambia, to the Hakan peat power project, wherein they're using peat to generate electricity that's under construction in Rwanda. We are participants on the debt side in a large hydro project in the Cameroons. We're also participants in a hydro project in Ivory Coast that's currently under construction. In Togo, we are participants in a smaller project which is under construction. Again, utilizing gas. And right now we are very advanced in a 350 megawatt combined cycle facility in Senegal. So we are active in concrete projects within the power sector clearly on the continent, but we're also very active in all of these other sectors that I mentioned to you as it relates to infrastructure in the continent. And in every one of these things, one of the things that we try to do, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, is that we advocate with governments in terms of trying to create the environment which allows us, but more importantly, allows other participants to come in after us. So it's almost like you're opening the door and creating a catalytic environment that allows for other investments to happen. And this is really what needs to happen. This is not a burden that 1, 2, 3, or 4 institutions can bear. The challenge of infrastructure in Africa is very big, and we need to deal with it at an institutional level that then allows big and small institutions to participate and allow Africans to actually come into the 21st century.
Now, we also know that the energy potential across the continent is not evenly spread. How do you look at prospects of energy sufficient countries supplementing those that are, that are less endowed with opportunities? For instance, if Nigeria, I know Nigeria has some power issues. I'm just using that as an example. If Nigeria were to supply energy to neighboring countries like Niger or Benin, what are the prospects of this happening? What will be needed?
Okay, it's a physical. The question you're asking is a physical question. It's a question essentially that has to address physical constraints. So there are two sides to it. One is having the adequate level of generation, actually having the electricity to give somebody else. So you have to have that adequate level of generation, which in most cases is not there. But the other piece of it, which is the question you're really asking, which is what is needed, is that you need transmission facilities. You need to be able to carry the electricity from point A to point B and the substations and all of the other infrastructure in between. In the way that this problem has partially been addressed, God bless you, is through what they call power pools. So in Southern Africa, you have the Southern African Power Pool, which includes countries like South Africa, Zambia, Namibia, all of those countries within Southern Africa. In West Africa, you also have the West Africa Power Pool that includes a number of countries in West Africa. Now, the viability and the purpose is that at certain times of the day, and in certain countries, you may have surplus power that will go from surplus countries to countries that are in deficit. And there are countries, in fact, that for several years will almost have no addition to the power on the grid, but they'll rely on other countries. In order for you to do this, though, you do need to have strong, stable, and dependable transmission line infrastructure. And this is the Achilles heel in Africa that we've seen, where in most countries, you barely have adequate transmission infrastructure in country, let alone transmission infrastructure that actually crosses from one country to the other and still is able to provide electricity in a solid way. So that's easily the biggest constraint. That said, there is some transmission infrastructure, and the example you used, which is Nigeria. So today, Nigeria does indeed sell electricity under a multilateral agreement to Niger, utilizing the existing corridor. They also sell electricity to modest amounts of electricity to Niger and Togo. A lot more of this can be done, clearly. Ivory Coast sells quite a bit of electricity to its neighbors. It's an energy surplus country, and the infra is there to sell that electricity. The other problem, though, beyond just the physical infrastructure being there, which is very important, is that when you sell that electricity to the other party, they also need to pay you for the electricity that you've sold them. They need to give you an incentive to continue to sell electricity to them. Regrettably, the payment history has not been what it needs to be. The economic incentives to sell this electricity in a manner that you and I would envision is yet to fully mature, so that this method of trading electricity can actually meet its full potential. But it will absolutely be necessary, because there are certain geographies that are much better endowed with resources to cheaply generate electricity that then needs to transfer to other places where it can also be consumed. The last point I need to make is that in some jurisdictions, especially if it's a very small country, but more important than being small, if it's an economically challenged country, even the cost of that infrastructure might be quite large. The cost of the infrastructure to transport the electricity might be large, and that itself would constitute a constraint. But the short answer to your question is, number one, the infrastructure, and number two, the ability to pay for the product if someone can deliver it to you.
All right.
That equation needs to be completed.
Okay. I'm sorry, Eluma, to interrupt you. It was very good to hear you. Ajong, I'm very pleased with this conversation. I remember, Ajong, once I invited you to come to Brazil. I think we can do something very special. I can invite you now, you, Ajong, and you, Eluma, to come to Brazil when the gates are open. And I hope by the end of this year, Brazil will be a place where both of you can come to Brazil to visit us And I promise it to you that the discussion that we started now will continue when both of you come to Brazil. So you'll be my guest, and I really would like to appreciate your participation, Ajong, in this moment. Also, you, Eluma, coming to this very impressive discussion about the challenge of the climate change and also the financial part of this big equation. So thank you very much, Ajong, for your participation. Also, thank you very much, Eluma, for your kindness to be with us. And I hope very soon I can be with you in Brazil or in Africa. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you both with us.
You're welcome, Prof. And thank you, Mr. Eluma.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you both. Thank you.